Hello, everyone, and welcome to YouTube Masterclass. We are speaking for Professor Sheley is me, and I'll be teaching the classes to come. And this is my final class, hour length, well, half hour today, of genre, the Western and film study. We're teaching adjunct at USC, adjunct at Calarts, and adjunct at Harvard, and we're teaching these film classes as a core of the medium, so not only I can get credit so I can finish my work with that I owe the professorship to these schools that I graduated from, these universities, institutions. California Institute of the Arts, got a PhD in writing, and then got other PhDs in other schools around the same time. I find that there are other students that do that route. Like, I don't think it's specific to me to just get all the degrees I need for the one I'm looking for the most. That can be common, and it can be common that it's the same schools in that. And the reason why is because, like, they're advancing the way remote works, and these classes are all remote. I mean, everything I teach from a recording that you see me talking about is the remote teaching. And that's what's weird about it, is you just have to make sure that the bar at the bottom of the screen or across the screen goes all the way through on YouTube, that it's YouTube Masterclass. I mean, I know one day I probably would be teaching a class on how to run YouTube and how to be operative of YouTube, or explain some of my jobs. Like, I was just given a promotion to Facebook professional, and there's others that have that, and it's like they already have that going on. And I'm not like bragging rights. I promise I'm not showing off or anything. I'm just saying that, like, I have to at least put up my emblem saying, well, I have many degrees. I wasn't, doing that just to, like, beat everyone else having more degrees. It's really hard to even achieve one, but usually you'll have to achieve multi. Just something to think about if you pursue the remote internet way of learning, and that comes to you because a class like this can really help get the electives that you need if you are taking college in that manner. And I know that today we're in the West, it's our last day of the Western. And it took me a while to get into, but what I was pausing and thinking is the Western was a good genre for us to analyze, because it talks about the coming to the frontier, and it's kind of like this, I don't know, Messiah complex or something, that, like, all of us died as we moved to the West, and we laid our bones in the ground, like that old lady says in The Searchers. And you're like, well, they laid their bones in the ground, they were going out west, it's all a big tragedy, but they're still alive at the end, staring at the sunset, or riding their horse into the sunset. And it's weird how, like, there's Westerns in different versions, because I've seen the TCM versions and, like, the home video versions of these movies, but we've been talking about how there's other versions of movies, and there's other versions of Stagecoach, which have, like, the version of his stagecoach flipping over and crashing. And when they looked in the crash, like, everybody was dead, and, like, that's how it really ended in that one. And it was like, it went on from there, and they went further on the trail. They fixed the stagecoach, but it didn't look realistic, so they took it out. And there's other things. One thing is interesting about John Ford is he did that movie that wasn't a Western for 10 years. After Iron Horse, he did no Westerns until he got to Stagecoach 15 years later, 15 years later. Yeah, because when he made Prisoner of Shark Island in 1935, he was already partaking of his other side, which was drama or action, regardless of being Western. And so he did these other films. Prisoner of Shark Island's about the guy that tried to assassinate Abraham Lincoln, and he's played in this movie as, like, this guy who has to escape prison because he's got to help someone come back to life. He's got to help someone bring someone back to life. And so the point is it's all this rigid structure, like classical Hollywood, showing you how these things were working, these like icons were working, of, like, the non-West fitting into John Ford's other side of movies, and that they were A-list movies too. Even The Informer, which won an Oscar for John Ford, you've got to admit, is a well-crafted movie. It's a well-crafted gangster film. And so then you get back to his Westerns, and the point is like, you can really see what the genre of Western relied on for its biggest quotation of how to recreate the Old West, and that is in John Ford's putting together Stagecoach, and even the scenes that were taken out I think in Stagecoach or Searchers had some scenes taken out. There were like really across the floor disadvantageously bloody scenes of Indians and things strewing people out, and it's like it gets real. It's not exactly like as bad as Cannibal Holocaust or anything, don't get me wrong, right? But it's like there's these things in Searchers where they had this like, meat on a stick that was supposed to represent the guys they scalped, and it was like they had to take that out. And I like, there's really westerns nowadays can actually portray things that are like violent as long as they're recreating it, and they do it in kind of a not in like such an unnecessarily gruesome way, but it still can be. Like, you think about how isolated and clean the set of a David Cronenberg movie is before the brain splatters, in the film, and you're seeing it all get all grimy and gooky and everything. And so if you look at these aestheticized moments, they didn't fit the film because the film was more aesthetic without the violence that was just recommended to refer you to thinking that there was really some kind of slaughter there. And that was moved out of Western films mainly because they were already seen violent enough as shooting each other. But then you get into like Sam Peckinpah with Wild Bunch. And finally it's just the over the edge, let's go, all the those movies that were fistful of dollars, and like we can make these big westerns and we can make them totally flow how we want them to, and with a montage. Peckinpah's really interested in this. He's already directing westerns, and like there's blood in his, there's blood and guts in his, not so much in Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, but there's blood and guts in his other films, especially The Wild Bunch, which does have that shootout at the end in Mexico against that whole like array of Mexican soldiers that they have to take down in order for them to stop torturing the one at the bottom, which is Angel, who's been captured. And so they spend the rest of their time and money trying to help him not get so tortured. And it gets really bloody along the way. There's a part that's like the Mexican-American War, Civil War, kind of interwrapping each other. We talked about that. And The Wild Bunch, I'm sure, had some censorship. There's a scene that they put back in where there's these naked girls bathing with this guy who's in The Wild Bunch, and it's like they took it out of some versions, but that's in the director's cut, and you're like, well, it seems misogynistic, to have these images of these women, and like, would we really watch it just for that? But it's more of them by being like wild, like being just as free as they can, because they're taking brides. And it's like you look at it and you're like, this doesn't seem misogynistic only because it is. Like, they're presenting it in such a solid manner of candelabra stuck in waxworks that, like, I don't think they really mean to like punish us with the image, or to say that the image is really what is screwing things up, or making it look fake, or making it look real enough to seem that like it's a real moment when you still know it's actors playing the part. So you can't get totally cynical about how the backdrop apparatus of film doesn't exactly always match with what is seen on the image, but usually comes pretty close when all the narrative design is being pressured into the director and producer, and then they go on to hire the actors. And so the writer comes on and shows them that he can write what they want. And in these kind of productions, these classical ones, the scripts are coming up around the same time as the director is getting it. And so it's like, because there's so much like work that goes on at like a big studio that presents a script to the head scriptwriter, then if he decides that it's worthy of making into a film, they've already talked to a director who's looking for a film like that, and that's how they match him up, and they give him that film on screenplay. And it seems like an ideal system, but it narrows it down to like barely anybody ever gets a screenplay in that isn't already there on the block at like, the studio, working all the time behind the scenes on the film that they know a certain director might like, and they're kind of gambling it like it's on spec, for instance, is like they're going to get paid later. And who can argue with that? No, when you're me, who can argue with that, right? No, I'm kidding. But anyways, so I didn't really find it to be non-feministic to be into movies with women. And the one thing I didn't like with that are male directors, and I didn't really know, and that's like every movie, like that the nudity is kind of treated as contrite, I didn't like. But like that it was there at all to not really offend was what I didn't mind. Like, it wasn't, even if it had been trying to be offensive, which it wasn't. Like, I was a little offended because he's like, the Wild Bunch guy's like shoving in on him. I mean, it's not like he's really shoving in on him, but it just looks like there's some uncomfortable, like, not really harassment, but like the play is going to where we don't want you to film. It almost seems like they don't want him to film them, and like maybe that's the meaning of that scene, but I'm just saying, like, was that an awkward moment? All right, hang on, I'm getting back to the movie. No. And like they left it into the director's cut, and I love how Sam Peckinpah always justifies it. He's like, well, if that happens in real life, and I'm not doing an impression, but he's like, if that happens in real life, then wouldn't somebody be angry about it or take action? Isn't that how it would look like and be like? And I'm like, well, yeah, it happened in the movie. You're like, well, then it happened in real life, I guess, because it happened in the movie. I mean, and we all know that's kind of a joke, because it's like, just because it happens in the movie doesn't mean it happens in real life or had happened in real life. Sometimes it's an altered perspective. That the genre of the Western is set in the Old West means it's nothing like real life, because real life's not set in the Old West. Even if we were suddenly whisked back to the Old West, we wouldn't be there, because the Old West would be too far away for us to travel back in time. I swear they do it in Back to the Future 3, but hear me out. The Old West is a genre, especially because it plugs into the iconography of the frontiersmen crossing the Great Divide, right all the way to California. And that's always been a story that, like, there's been sentiment behind with Hollywood, because Hollywood kind of was founded among that attitude of, like, everybody's moving west and escaping from Thomas Edison. And these are things after the Civil War, and it had been gone for 30 years. It had been over, and it's kind of like now industry is starting to reach to the West, and there's all these like new factorization and industrialization. And then now it's going to be interesting to see what all happens with the Western genre, because we're in the digital territory. We're in digital territory where everything is ranked by its amount of beauty in the image. Again, in the technology of the beauty of the image is something that is really concentrated on today. And it seems like there are still Western shows on TV, and there's reruns of Western shows on TV, and there's Peckinpah got a job, working for TV before he got into the movies. And even between the time he was making Deadly Companions and onward to later films like Convoy, he worked on TV that whole time and was using TV technique in the movies and movie technique in the TV. And it's very split screen, the way it montages fast and montages quick, and it keeps your eye bouncing like a movie like Natural Born Killers. You can see how it came from Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. You can kind of see how they would make a road movie out of lovers on the run that have to capture the head of this famous mob boss, which his head is either already sliced off or no one really knows. But I don't want to offend anybody. This class isn't to offend anyone. We're not saying that, like, we like the fact that these guys die in these Westerns. We really don't. Like, a guy that's watching a Western may watch it for the action, and sometimes action can be violent or whatever, like somebody shooting at him or something, that can be violent. But, like, they don't always show the blood and guts necessarily to prove that point. But when they do, is really, with Westerns, I can't really think of too many other than Sam Peckinpah's and a couple of others that were really bloody movies. Now you look at the Wild Bunch and at the end, and that negates what I'm saying by 100%, because that's one big blood ballet shootout. And everybody's shooting each other in this one big blood ballet, and they're filling the whole place up with blood, and they kill everybody. It's like all the people that died in Westerns that they didn't show the blood and guts to. It's like they're cleaning up, and they all kill each other and they all die. pretty much in this one big battle, and there was less of the Wild Bunch than there were the guys there that they ended up gunning down. And it's this whole thing about how they were going to bring guns to Mexico, and then Mexico was going to intercept their weapons, and Mexico never pays off or whatever, or they do get paid off, and then some other Mexicans end up betraying the Wild Bunch, and they chase them off and everything. No, they kill each other, and then the last of the Wild Bunch comes in, this like new group of them that were following around their career. So we look at these examples of how classical goes to modern. The modern has the Wild Bunch on the high end, and the classical still models itself after Stagecoach all the way through Searchers is the classical. And then you have Left-Handed Gun, which is kind of more of a modern Western. And there's other Westerns too, like of the classical era, like Santa Fe Trail, that like totally is like Fort Apache and this like oblivious love for General Custer, who's then totally destroyed in Little Big Man as the total loser of all time, And we don't really rank politics here. I can't really make a political adjustment, but I think it's only fair to put Custer down really in the way we've been distributing thought, that maybe the Native American would have been better off if we'd have never talked to him in the first place. And, if we didn't move in, we wouldn't be here. But that if we didn't drench them all in blood and chaos, then we'd be a lot better people with a lot better karma. So now that we all feel bad, Westerns are hard to approach even in the classical era, because then you get Santa Fe Trail where it looks like they're fighting for Custer's agenda, and you just think that looks worse than anything in retrospect. And you try to explain to them that Custer really, even in the classical one, still gets killed and falls over and dies. But what doesn't make sense about the Custer factor is why he's getting heroic praise in Fort Apache and Santa Fe Trail and other Hollywood movies around that time. They were kind of representing how they wanted to represent their leaders, and their leaders were important to them. But everybody knew that Custer led a blind rage of homicidal terror and ended up getting his head cut off. And it was really an unheroic story. And it was really like the time that the natives could be let go, because there was only like very little of them left. And it's a very sad story. One of the things that'll keep us all going, though, is the Native Americans admitted at some point in their history that they were ready to all pass on. And I don't know if that's not really a good excuse to like eliminate everyone there. But, like, if they're saying that they're going to pass on, like, Last of the Mohicans style, then I can see some ritual and writ written into this whole, they still need shot when they're trying to blow up a stagecoach type thing, just for a movie. And you can do that just for a movie, except that it looks kind of tacky, because you're saying this is what a Native American actually looked like, and that's going to be really tacky in any kind of film that's dated, because the clothes that we wear in the era that it's supposed to be from are from the era that it's from, and then they're outdated by our era by 2 eras. And that's how costume design has a wicked time with that. So yeah, I'm not saying that, like, the version of, say, the Klansmen in Birth of a Nation, now do they look authentic? Nobody really knows, or do they? And is that even a dangerous question? And do you pose to your class, well, is that what they look like now? Because that would either be white supremacist or not. They'd say, yeah, they totally wear it like that. Isn't that cool? Or, yeah, that's totally scary. Their new ones are like this. And, you could totally judge someone by a trick question like that. So it's a good thing we have these finals to kind of base our biggest fear on, and that is we won't be able to think of anything to write about a movie. If we're doing film criticism, film study, we need to learn how to write about a movie. And to write about film there's actually a book, Writing About Film. And to write about it, you need like a thesis, which is like a designated argument that like you feel this film is good because. But now the question is, between classical cinema and the Western with its genre in one box, and then the modern genre of Western, like we talked about Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid in this box. And we say, what are the compare and contrast? So to compare and contrast, we already know that the classical one is going to be linear. We always know the the montage in Peckinpah is somewhat nonlinear, especially considering if it was in real time, which it doesn't try to be. It imitates real time to look as though the shots are happening at the same second as each other, and how he matches that up is a timing that he must have so down to the knot, probably because of TV and everything. But I think his justification for the violence in his films and the things we see is, again, that one word exists. We can show it if it happened. We can make it so it seems like it happened. Like, we can make this really seem like it's real, is what the passion is of a lot of filmmakers. Like, they get in there and they say, well, I'm going to make this. There's something about this film that's just going to draw me in, and so I do love a good Western. I've seen, I may bark about Santa Fe Trail and all that, and Fort Apache all the time, but, honestly, there's the whole thing. There's other things that were worse. And I don't need to go into a lot of those, not just in Hollywood, but like in terms of racism, and that the real racism usually wasn't the Westerns. I mean, that they weren't really misogynistic either is kind of up for air when it comes to like the modern era, because in the modern era, it seems like the female, like even in Butch Cassidy, gets kind of subsided and pushed along and just like becomes in their framework, but like it's doesn't really know what the romance between the both of them is going to look like. And so there's this hope that this semester, this summer school we had, taught you about Western films and how that applies to film criticism, is that I want you to write for your final a review about a classical movie and a review about a modern movie and compare and contrast. It only has to be 2 pages max. I won't even make you write that much. It's a hard class, but the paper has to be perfect if it's only 2 pages. It can be up to, like, you can write it up to 8 pages. If you have more than that, we're not going to punish you. You can turn in as big of a paper as you want. If you want to turn in a big, thick paper, you'll probably get an A for it at Coursera. I don't know. They're the ones that map this out. I mean, sometimes they have to be so strategic in getting in and finding out like what the final gist was that I spoke, so they can enter it in, so they can have their, machine graded material, and it's like, well, if they look at it too, then they can know right away if these people are interested in film. And it seems like we've had a pretty good response to that. Like, it seems like there are those that like do think about film in more of a critical theory, that is to like understand what modes of representation you like, and then the theory is just why those are the modes of representation that you perceive to be the most for your analytic appetite, or whatever, your appetitives. That like movies fulfill this kind of sense that books do, that like they're complete and they have, and like the whole story is there, and that like since the whole story is there, you can see it from beginning to end, just left to right, except for a film drops down like this, and the next frame comes, and the next frame comes. And so we've looked at these movies, and it kind of gets like, we didn't get redundant. Like, fortunately, this is summer school, and we're about to be done for good with this class. I hope you can get that final in soon. If you don't see this class until later after it's recorded, later than that, a couple of days from now or whatever, it doesn't matter when you watch it, as long as if you're doing the Coursera, you see them all and hear them all. And again, this semester we looked at classical and modern Westerns. Now, next semester, I'm doing a class on Orson Welles. And it's going to be fun, and it's going to be considerably worth it, and I've done all the research. We might have to take a long class dedicated to the talk about the Blacklist, as we did in Griffith. That it'll be around this time after Griffith, I think that's a good thing. But I'm not going to brag like I know what I'm doing teaching it. I know what I'm doing teaching it, but it's not like it's an Orson Welles story we've all heard, but like we all need to hear it in context of the films and of the narrative. So I'll be talking about him, and then like that'll be in the fall, and then in the spring, I'm teaching postmodernism. At least that's what I have written down in my books, and I'm ready for that one too. I'm really interested in postmodernism, and postmodernism is a class that I really want to teach and really want to construct for the students, a way for them to represent their imagery that they have in a movie, even if it's the postmodern way where you're kind of imitating the art to imitate art, you know, and you kind of just get this feeling that like reality is surrealism, and then like the surrealism leads you to the whole idea that you have like perhaps a doppelganger. The mirror makes you think you have a doppelganger, you know, and sleep, you can dream, you know. So to have a dream and then like analyze it and then put it in a script or put it in a movie is really rare, but then to have it be a dream in that movie is already rare. You know, that's already a raresome idea. So join me, if you will, for Orson Welles next semester. And there's not much else to talk about in Western. I want to leave one concept behind, that there is this kind of cushion to the seat that ejects whenever there's a genre play that's outdated or is in the old. And I'm saying there is something new to construct about the thematics, whether you disagree with the ideologies of the film. And ideologies of film are so different, and there's always so many, that like you can choose the heterogeneous play between like your free play, and that gives you your 42 categories of language, of which frontier language is the language of Western. And this is an English response to like a whole slew of responses, and that's just the down-home goodness. We're still in a Western now type ology of, you know, like all the way through Louis L'Amour's books of the Old West. And I think it's an icon now that like you can't quite see how the digital medium is going to reflect it. There is some TV and everything, but that the digital media is reflecting recrafted and restored visions of all the directors, from John Ford to Peckinpah, and it was Iron Horse to like all the way through to Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. Excuse me for saying it again. And then you see this kind of spectacle, how the West was won, like this big stretched out spectacle about how the colors and images came to life for the myth of total cinema. That it would have been the myth of total cinema, and how the West was won in Cinerama with the 3 screens side by side, and they were taking 3 cameras side by side and filming it. It's the most epic thing you see. It's got the best recorded sound. It's got really good underscore, you know, this music under it that you hear playing while you're watching the film. You know, you hear the wind blow, and Jimmy Stewart's walking around near the ocean, you know, it's like, or this river that runs through the city. Sorry, not the ocean. Well, they could have been near the ocean, right? But they were in bamboo canoes, and they were floating up and down this river, and it was dangerous, you know. It was like, bring us only to deliverance, you know. And it's like, but how the West was won was the myth of totally cinema. And that just means that it's Bazan's idea that everything that's real within the frame that's recorded is representing a real moment, even if it's been altered for the scene. And that these have been altered for the scene by the bounds of genre means that the bounds of genre are what alters the scene between the lines, to how long the take lasts to how long the take stays. And in a Western, at the end, those takes stays longer, and at the beginning, the take stays shorter, because it has a while to catch up to the story before it gets to the end drawn out, like you would do with a periodical, or if you're testing, you do the small questions first, to fill in the blank first, and then you write your essay. And it's more of an exam book, the way he's putting this together. So if that's really confusing or makes any sense at all, I think what we learn from it is that the colors on the screen that are representing, and the pictures that are representing the reality that they filmed at that time, are then being shown to us at a later time. So we've got to remember that like that was a reality that they like altered to look a certain way. And if now that seems distant, it might be because the programs we have now seem so up to the real that we believe in the real enough that the digital real has become itself for us. That there is digital movies, and like the Star Wars, you know, episode 2 started the whole digital movie thing, and it's got the whole, like, the whole movie's made digitally. And so if Westerns could be that way, you know, where you construct it all from a sort of special effect or from a center of time. You can find what they look like by flying a computer to back then. No, don't get any ideas. But the Western is a revered genre because it's long lingered in our minds. Those images of the stagecoaches going by, like in Hateful Eight, when they're climbing that hill in Telluride, and the whole stagecoach is about to fall over the hill. You just can't forget when those horses are panting and the whole thing is sweating up the snow. And that's the Western. I mean, it's snarling horses. It's like, and of course they're trained by the Humane Society, right? But they're going up the hill, and the thing is like the carriage is shaking, the stagecoach is shaking the carriage, and it looks like they're going to fall off the side, and you're just thinking, this is the ultimate genre, the Western, for this ultimate director. And we already talked too much about that, so we'll just end with a positive quote that, like, the deepest and farthest you can go, even if it's a struggle, is always made right in the rewards of finding your own self, like they say in The Searchers. Anyways, we'll take it easy, everybody. I hope you take the next class, and I hope the final's not too hard for you. That was a good semester. I'm looking forward to Orson Welles' class next. We'll have to do that. Not for a while. It doesn't start until, like the end of... no, it's going to be the end of July, maybe. We'll see. And I know the end of July is coming up and everything, and it looks like that. But August will be about the time I start, so maybe August 3rd or the end of this month. It's a good thing we finished when we did. Thank you, class.